An isolated world, cut off from the rest of the galaxy for most of its history. Inhabited by untouched wildlife and a handful of stranded souls struggling to survive. Yet, as its obscurity began to be exploited, it became the stage for events that would change the galaxy forever. Welcome to the forest moon of Endor. The planet Endor was a gas giant located in a region of the galaxy that only a few centuries before the rise of the Empire had still been considered part of the unknown regions. Exploration of the surrounding systems began only during the final centuries of the Old Republic. Even after most of the region had been charted, hyperspace navigation in the vicinity of the Endor system remained notoriously difficult and dangerous. One of the primary reasons for this was the Endor Gate, a black hole located near one of the few known hyperspace routes leading into the system. Despite the rich natural resources found on several celestial bodies within the Endor system, the region's remoteness and the risk associated with interstellar travel were sufficient to prevent the establishment of economic operations on any significant scale. Lacking any known deposits of Tibanna gas or other highly valuable resources, the gas giant Endor itself was considered largely unremarkable. The same, however, could not be said of the largest of its 9 moons. Covered in a wide variety of biomes dominated by dense forests of towering trees, the moon became widely known as the Forest Moon, or the Sanctuary Moon, after scientific studies revealed the full extent of its unique ecosystem, ultimately leading to its designation as a protected nature reserve by the Republic. As it was the only truly remarkable celestial body within the system, the name Endor was often used interchangeably to refer not only to the gas giant but also to the forest moon itself. Flowing down from high mountain ranges, raging rivers carved their way through the landscape before emptying into vast lakes. Here and there, serene glades broke through the dense forest canopy, allowing sunlight to reach the ground where a wide variety of grasses and bushes flourished. Only in a handful of particularly dry regions did deserts replace the otherwise dominant forests. The largest of these arid regions was the Salma Desert in the Moon's northern hemisphere. Located atop the Javari Cliffs Plateau, the rocky desert was home to only a handful of resilient wildlife species. Among them the flying reptilian mantigrues and the rammers, small scavenging rodents adapted to the harsh environment. The many mountains rising from the desert were riddled with caves that provided shelter for animals struggling to survive in the unforgiving landscape. Among the creatures inhabiting these cavern systems was the forest moon's apex predator, the Gorax. Gigantic, semi-sentient, humanoid ape-like creatures, the Gorax could grow to the size of a small tree. They were known to use primitive tools and clothing to adapt to their environment. During their hunts, Gorax were capable of traversing vast distances, often venturing deep into the surrounding forests, where they preyed upon even the largest native fauna. Among the species native to the moon's woodlands were a wide variety of birds, most notably the beautiful lantern birds, distinguished by their luminous and elaborate tail feathers. Numerous smaller rodents and reptiles inhabited the treetops, constantly leaping from branch to branch in a continuous search for food. In the dense vegetation on the forest floor, Merrics could be found, arachnid creatures with oddly humanoid-shaped torsos. Herds of boar dogs fed on leaves from bushes and low-hanging branches, while boar wolves hunted during the twilight hours. Surprisingly, Endor was home to not only one but several sentient species, although none of them had developed a technologically advanced civilization. Most well known among them were the Ewoks, small furry bipeds with multiple tribes inhabiting the sanctuary moon. Individual tribes were typically centered around a main settlement and were highly territorial, at times even coming into conflict over contested areas. Despite their relatively primitive technology, the Ewoks constructed impressive hanging villages anchored to the trunks of massive trees and interconnected by bridges, positioned high above the forest floor and largely beyond the reach of most native predators. Tribes living near large bodies of water built entire villages of stilted huts extending over shallow waters. Distantly related to the Ewoks were the Duloks, a species that evolved alongside them on the forest moon. Duloks were taller and more slender than Ewoks and were widely regarded as their natural rivals. Like the Ewoks, they lived in clans, typically settling in or around caves within Endor's mountain ranges and swamp regions. The Duloks employed primitive tools, such as spears for hunting, but demonstrated less sophisticated construction skills compared to their Ewok counterparts. While a small number of Dulok clans maintained limited trade relations with other sentient species, most remained hostile and unpredictable when interacting with others. The third native sentient species of the forest moon were the Yasam. They were considerably taller than Ewoks and Duloks, standing slightly above the average height of a human. Their bulky, fur-covered torsos rested on two long but slender legs, adapted for movement and hunting across the grasslands bordering Endor's dense forests. Yasams were notably intelligent and displayed a strong aptitude for music. Despite the Sanctuary Moon's protected status as a nature reserve, some poachers still risked the dangerous journey to the Endor system in order to capture and export Yasams along with other native life forms. The oldest evidence of visitors from outside the Endor system could be found on the forest moon in form of what the Ewoks called lost temples. These were large stone structures decorated with carvings of avian creatures and symbols unknown to any of the native sentient species. It was speculated that these structures had been abandoned and forgotten outposts of a religious sect of the Airu, an avian species and the first within the model sector, of which the Endor system was part, to have developed space travel, long before the region was explored by the Republic. This interpretation was further supported by the Airu's known tendency toward collecting and hoarding, which was thought to explain the various treasures, as the Ewoks called them, that were discovered within these stone temples. More than 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, one of the first recorded ships to crash on the Sanctuary Moon did so after falling victim to the region's dangerously difficult navigation routes. Although the destination and cargo of the transport remained unknown, the vessel had been heavily modified with reinforced cages intended to carry large and dangerous creatures. It is widely believed that this first recorded crash introduced both the Goraks and the Flogs to Endor. The Goraks went on to establish themselves as apex predators of the moon, while the Flogs, sentient but primitive humanoids of large, bulky stature, lived largely peaceful lives outside the forest, maintaining a small but stable population for many generations. Over the next hundreds of years, multiple ships would crash land on the moon. Rescue operations were rarely conducted, and surviving crews were often forced to endure the harsh environment on their own. A number of animal species were introduced to the Moon through the wreckage of livestock transports, along with various groups of sentient beings, including the Gupins and Teaks, when the transport vessel Starhunter Delba crashed into the forest approximately 800 years before the Battle of Yavin. A colony ship bound for Kuna's Eye, a star system located near the Endor system, crash-landed on the forest moon approximately 670 years later, introducing yet another two groups of sentient beings to the moon. Thanks to whatever colonization equipment had survived the impact, the two groups were able to adapt to the environment and instead established settlements on Endor, where they survived for many generations. Although the sizable moon offered vast habitable regions, the various stranded groups encountered one another on multiple occasions. While contact was not always friendly, persistent large-scale conflict remained relatively rare. This changed approximately 100 years before the Battle of Yavin, when a group of Sanyazan criminals, accompanied by a Night Sister witch from Dathomir, became stranded on Endor. The Sanyazans were an aggressive culture, best known as ruthless pirates, while the witch had been exiled from her fellow Night Sisters after stealing valuable artifacts. Together they constructed fortified strongholds from starship wreckage and other salvaged materials across the dragon-pelt savanna and the adjacent grasslands, from which they forcibly drove out other sentient inhabitants. Constantly searching for additional wrecked vessels in hopes of recovering technology that could facilitate their escape, the Sanyazan marauders brought sustained conflict to large parts of the Sanctuary Moon. Not all pilots failed to navigate the gravitational anomalies of the region. Despite, or perhaps because of, the inaccessibility of the forest moon and its status as a protected nature reserve, specimens of its exotic wildlife were considered highly valuable on the black market. From time to time, various groups of particularly bold poachers ventured into the Endor system to capture a wide range of creatures, which were then sold through illicit trade networks. Around 27 years before the Battle of Yavin, a priestess of the Order of the Fib, an extremist religious sect that had been active within Republic space for more than 12,000 years, traveled to Endor in an attempt to convert the local sentient species to her faith, but with little success. 3 years later, the Clone Wars broke out between the Galactic Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. The conflict soon engulfed nearly the entire galaxy and, by the third year of the war, also reached Endor. The Separatist droid army established a small outpost on the Sanctuary Moon. When this presence was discovered, the Republic deployed clone troopers to eliminate the enemy's installation. However, when the Republic's forces failed to report back, a small strike team was dispatched to investigate. They discovered that all clone troopers had been killed, but the battle droids had been destroyed as well and the Separatist outpost had been abandoned. After establishing contact with the local Ewok tribe, the strike team learned that both forces had fallen prey to a massive creature inhabiting a vast cave near the outpost. The strike team subsequently killed the beast and reported a Republic victory over the Separatists, alongside the loss of an entire clone battalion. Shortly thereafter, the Clone Wars came to an end as the Republic was restructured into the First Galactic Empire, an autocratic regime that soon asserted control over large parts of the galaxy. After the Empire took control of their home world, a splinter group of the Death Watch, an orthodox traditionalist faction from Mandalore, fled to Endor. There, they established a new base within an underground bunker hidden deep in the forest. From this location, they continued to coordinate their underworld activities, although their influence had been significantly diminished. Independently of the Death Watch, a number of criminal individuals made their way to the Forest Moon around the time of the Battle of Yavin. Believing they would be safe from Imperial law enforcement in such a remote and difficult-to-navigate region, a smuggler outpost was established, primarily used by hunters, creature smugglers, and other individuals seeking to keep a low profile. With a new partnership between the Death Watch and the Black Sun, one of the galaxy's most powerful crime syndicates, the Black Sun established a base on Endor as well. Situated in a mountainous region of the moon, the facility was used to coordinate pirate activity in adjacent systems and to facilitate close collaboration between the two criminal organizations. The period of concealment on the remote moon soon came to an end as it drew the attention of the Empire. In search of a suitable construction site for the second Death Star, Imperial forces surveyed numerous locations across the galaxy. The new superweapon had begun construction shortly after the destruction of the first Death Star at the Battle of Yavin and needed to remain hidden from the Rebel Alliance. Requiring a location both remote and suitable for a large-scale construction project, the Sanctuary Moon was identified as a potential candidate. Due to the dangers of navigating the system, none of the other resource-rich worlds had been significantly exploited, leaving them as an untapped source for construction materials. Shortly thereafter, the first Imperial expedition to Endor took place. The ground team encountered the Ewoks but was deceived and actively hindered by the natives in their attempts to properly survey the moon. While the team reported that the native sentient species should not be underestimated and might even pose a potential threat to Imperial operations, recommending further study, the expedition's commander downplayed these findings and ultimately reported Endor as an excellent construction site. Imperial Command expressed dissatisfaction with the low-quality initial survey report and ordered a second expedition to the moon. This time, the survey team spent multiple days on the moon encountering both Ewoks and Yasms, and classifying both species as primitive and posing no threat to Imperial plans. However, several members of the team lost their lives after encounters with the Gorax and the stranded Sanyazan marauders. Despite the report detailing the dangers that the moon's wildlife and hostile groups could pose, the Empire ultimately decided to designate the Sanctuary Moon as the construction site for the second Death Star. With that, Endor's role as a haven for criminals came to an end. Investigating a deal between a treacherous Imperial captain and the Black Sun, an Imperial agent traced their activities to Endor and infiltrated the Black Sun's stronghold. In parallel, the Empire constructed multiple research and military outposts on the moon, and began establishing the supporting infrastructure required for the Death Star's construction. Among these installations was a large shield generator, designed to project a near-impenetrable shield from the moon's surface around the construction site in orbit. As part of these efforts, the Empire formed Tempest Force, a dedicated military unit stationed on Endor and tasked with protecting the shield generator from any potential threats. A construction project of the Death Star's scale required a constant and uninterrupted flow of materials and components in extraordinary quantities. This logistical effort could not be jeopardized by transports becoming lost within the gravitational anomalies of the region, which had caused numerous accidents in the past. For such a secret undertaking, it was also essential to ensure that material shipments would not generate excessive traffic along hyperspace routes monitored by the Rebel Alliance, which could have drawn attention and potentially exposed the existence of the second Death Star. In response, the Empire decided to artificially expand the Silvestri trace, an insignificant and often overlooked hyperspace lane, extending it so that it connected the Endor system with the heavily industrialized outer rim world of Sullust. Artificially maintaining a hyperspace route through technological means was a highly complex and costly endeavor, but it neutralized the effects of the region's dangerous anomalies and eliminated the risks faced by the transport vessels. Named after the forest moon, the newly created Sanctuary Pipeline enabled the Empire to move vast quantities of construction materials along a hyperspace route unknown to the rebels, leading to a remote system that was not only disconnected from major trade lanes, but also widely regarded as hazardous to navigate. Shortly after the Sanctuary Pipeline had been established and preparations had been completed, the unfinished second Death Star was relocated into a stable orbit around the forest moon. Around the same time, the Sanyazan marauders launched multiple raids against Ewok villages, believing that the tribes were hiding valuable technology that the stranded pirates could use to escape the moon. Although initially successful due to their physical and technological superiority, the Sanyazans soon encountered increasingly dangerous traps constructed by the Ewoks to defend their settlements. Despite their seemingly harmless appearance, the Ewoks proved highly capable of defending themselves. Having long endured repeated Gorax attacks on their villages, they had developed effective methods of protecting their territory, which they were able to adapt to the ongoing Sanyazan raids. 4 years into its construction, the Rebel Alliance learned of both the second Death Star and the Sanctuary Pipeline and its connection to Sullust. The recovered plans of the unfinished battle station further revealed that the design flaw which had led to the destruction of the first Death Star had been corrected. The rebels therefore concluded that their only valuable option was to act immediately, to destroy the shield generator on the forest moon's surface and eliminate the superweapon before it became fully operational. In an attempt to draw potential defensive forces away from Endor, the Alliance launched an attack on Imperial-occupied Sullust. In the end, they succeeded in liberating the planet as no Imperial reinforcements joined the battle. Using Sullust as a staging ground, the Rebel Alliance assembled its fleet, while a covert infiltration team landed on Endor to sabotage the shield generator. After scouting the area, the rebel saboteurs made friendly contact with the local Ewok tribe from Bright Tree Village. After regrouping in the Ewoks' treetop dwellings, they began their mission. The initial attempt by the infiltration team failed, and they were captured by Tempest Force. However, chaos soon erupted as the Ewoks attacked the Imperial forces in large numbers, allowing the rebels to free themselves. In the meantime, the rebel fleet had arrived in orbit. With the shield protecting the second Death Star still active, they were forced to abandon their immediate assault and instead faced a massive armada of Imperial ships. The Emperor had deliberately allowed the rebels to learn of his new superweapon in order to draw them into a trap, intending to engage their full strength and destroy the bulk of their forces in a single decisive battle. A triumph he fully expected to witness, personally, from the safety of the shielded battle station. Contrary to the rebels' assumptions, the upgraded superlaser of the station was already operational and opened fire on the attacking fleet, destroying multiple capital ships. After rebel forces on the moon's surface successfully destroyed the shield generator with the support of the Ewoks, the protective shield around the battle station collapsed. With the shield disabled, rebel forces were able to destroy the second Death Star, killing the Emperor and many members of Imperial High Command aboard the station. The remaining Imperial forces fled into hyperspace, thrown into confusion by the sudden collapse of the Empire's central command structure. Despite heavy losses, the Rebel Alliance celebrated its historic victory over the Empire and went on to form the Alliance of Free Planets, with Endor designated as its new capital. Only weeks later, forces of the Nagai, a civilization of humanoids from the companion dwarf galaxy Fire Fist, launched an attack on the Sanctuary Moon. Having probed rebel defenses on numerous worlds over the years, and with both the Empire and the Rebel Alliance weakened after the Battle of Endor, they saw an opportunity to begin an invasion of the main galaxy. The rebels struggled to hold off the invading forces while their base on the forest moon was evacuated, in part due to a double agent within their ranks who had leaked strategic information to the Nagai. Despite these setbacks, the individual skill of several rebel pilots and soldiers ultimately forced the Nagai to retreat. However, this engagement would mark only the first in a series of conflicts that would later be known as the Nagai-Toth War. With Imperial forces consumed by infighting and individual commanders struggling to maintain control over their remaining territories, an increasing number of worlds joined the Alliance of Free Planets during the ongoing conflict. 1 month after the destruction of the second Death Star, the Alliance formally proclaimed the New Republic, with Endor still serving as its capital. 3 years later, the New Republic relocated its capital to Coruscant, following the planet's liberation from Imperial control. As the Endor system gradually lost its strategic significance over the following years, the Sanctuary pipeline was no longer maintained and eventually fell into disrepair. With safe travel to the system no longer reliably available, the forest moon was largely left to itself. Nature reclaimed the abandoned and ruined installations of both the Empire and the New Republic, while vegetation slowly overgrew the areas where debris from the Death Star had fallen onto the surface. More than 30 years later, the Sanctuary Moon once again became a refuge for those seeking concealment. During the Second Galactic Civil War, a group of Jedi broke away from the Galactic Alliance, the successor to the New Republic, due to ideological differences and the ensuing conflict. They went into hiding on the forest moon and established a temporary base to continue their training. The arrival of a representative of the Galactic Alliance on Endor, however, soon forced them to leave the moon. And so Endor was abandoned once again. The native species continued their lives undisturbed while nature gradually reclaimed most traces of the events that had taken place here. Events that had marked a turning point in galactic history.